Did you know that you can do water slide decals directly over your dip powder? What's up, nail crew? It's Nicole, your fellow nail obsessed DIYer. I am a huge fan of water slide decals because I am terrible at drawing. So for me, if it's something I have to draw, it's probably going to be out. I'm going to show you how to do an easy nail art with just a decal. Now, the first thing that I was applying on the decals before I even started with my dip mani is from Pretty and Savage Creations, which is where the decals are from. It's this polish formula called necromancy, and what it does is it just gives your decal more elasticity and it kind of like freshens it up. So if you have decals that are much older and you want to use them, all you have to do is put this necromancy polish onto the decal at least 15 minutes before you want to use it, and then it freshens it back up. And I was so excited to try this. Even though these are newer decals, I just like wanted to see how it worked. While the necromancy sets onto the decal, let's talk about dipping, and I'm going to give you a bunch of tips and tricks for dipping light colors. So if you've been dipping for a while, you know that light colors can be a little bit harder to work with, not because necessarily the powder is difficult, but because they show all the flaws. So here are some things that you can do to make it a little bit easier to work with that light color dip. I like to make sure that I apply my dip base really thinly and evenly. Evenly is key. And I know I do this sometimes where I'm just not paying attention because I am a messy dipper. If you're new here and you don't know, or if you've been here for a while, I am a really messy dipper. I tend to spill a lot. I drop things. I don't pay the most attention. So if you're wanting somebody who keeps it real, you're definitely in the right place. But sometimes I forget how many times I apply the dip base brush over top of my nail. I'll do extra strokes and then my dip might end up being a little bit uneven. So definitely do not do that when you're dipping a light solid. Shimmers are a whole different powder. When you're doing shimmers, they're way more forgiving, but doing a light dip powder that's a solid can be a little bit more challenging because it shows all your flaws. So this powder was super easy to work with. All these powders are from OG dip powder. The light blue is called Your Skin is Pale White and Ice Cold. And then the darker navy blue that I'm going to be using, that's this gorgeous deep shimmer, is called I'm Going to Deck Your Halls Bub. And the dip liquids that I'm using are also from OG. So this light blue, I wanted to make sure that I applied it as evenly as possible. So I really focused on my application, making sure that I didn't flood my cuticles or apply too much dip base or go over my nail too many times. Now on my pointer finger, I did go over my nail too many times. I realized it later on, but by the time I had already poured my powder over, I was like, oh, too late. I'm just going to, buff it nicely after I put my clear dip powder on and see if I can get it smoothed out. So this is one reason why I'm such a huge proponent of doing clear dip powder as your last dip. If you've messed up your dip a little bit and you want to buff it more smooth, but you don't want to mess with the actual color, using the clear dip powder just fills in all the little nooks and crannies of your dip, regardless of whether it's a solid, a shimmer, a flake, a foil, a glitter, whatever it is. Using clear as your last dip is highly recommended by me. I know everybody doesn't do it, and you definitely don't see it a lot on social media, but you have to remember, when you're watching videos, a lot of us who do our nails do them a ton. So some people might not be doing all the steps that you would because you want your nails to last long, whereas a lot of us who are making social media content with it are popping them off with peel base a lot faster. So anytime I give you tips and tricks, it's that your nails can last as long as possible. Now, I only need to do 2 dips of each of the colors because in this mani, I have full cover tips and builder gel, so my apex was already built. Once I get through with all of my dips, I've applied my clear dip powder on top. I go in and I activate them. Activator is the step in your dip liquids. Some companies call it step 2, but what it does is the activator hardens the dip powder. And without that, the dip powder is really crumbly and it doesn't give you that hard acrylic type effect if you don't apply the activator. So you want to make sure you apply enough to cover your entire nail and be able to soak all the way through your layers. Then once that's fully hardened, you can go through, do your filing, buffing, and shaping to get your nice, even smooth nails, and make sure your shape is cleaned up if anything got a little bit too thick when you were dipping. I love using an e-file bit just around my cuticle area to really give me that nice clean cuticle line. I know some people can do this without an e-file, but for me, this is my secret to getting beautiful cuticle lines. Then I go through, spray my nails with isopropyl alcohol so they can get cleaned off, and then we can jump into how I actually go and apply the decal. So the first thing you want to do is you want to cut out your decal. And I like to make sure that my nail is very, very clean before I put anything on it. So I wipe it again with alcohol just to make sure that I didn't get anything stuck on it. I use this really cool air dry polish called Chokehold from Pretty and Savage Creations. And what it does is it's actually for decal application. I am obsessed with it. I had pretty much given up decals for the past couple years because I just couldn't find anything outside of gel that allowed me to apply the decal as nicely as I could with gels. And I'm not allergic to gels. I'm just trying to minimize my exposure to them. So once you soak your decal for about 15 seconds, then what you want to do is get some of that excess water off it. This way I have a paper towel underneath my decal and I just kind of like dab it back and forth. And then you can use a jelly stamper to apply your decal. Some people find that that's really helpful. I actually usually love the jelly stamper, but of course in this mani, when I was using the jelly stamper and I pressed it down, it did not apply evenly at all. I like applied it way too far to the right and I was like, well, crap. I didn't even see that. So luckily I had put necromancy on 2 different decals thinking like, okay, I know myself. I'm probably going to mess at least one up. So I went in and I got the second decal cut out and then I just placed it with my hand instead. This way I can make sure that I was placing it in the exact spot that I want. It's totally up to you what you feel more comfortable with. I do use the jelly stamper a lot, and then press it down, and it works really well a majority of the time, except when I'm not paying close attention like I was in this mani, and I apply it like really unevenly. The nice thing about the chokehold is that it's an air dry product. So although your decal is stuck down, you can still scrape it off before you actually finish your mani. So in this case, I just had to scrape a little bit of it off and then apply a little bit more chokehold, let that dry again for 3 minutes, which is like my dry time that I really like to do. People typically do about 3 to 5 minutes of letting the chokehold air dry. Then once I apply the decal onto my nails after it's soaked in water, I like to get the silicone tool to start pressing it down to exactly where I want it to be. And the silicone tool is a must have for me. Like I will not do the decals without these. I like the ones that have some kind of flat edge on it. So you can see the one side's kind of a pointy silicone tool and the other side is flat. The flat side is what I use to really smooth the decal down. And then I go in with actually they're cuticle scissors and cut around the excess decal just so I have less to take off. And now if you're not allergic to acetone, you can use pure acetone and melt the sides of the decal into your nail and it works so great. But I'm actually allergic to acetone, so I had to figure out another way to do it. And what I started doing not that long ago was I tried using a glass cuticle pusher to basically cut around the decal, and trace it around my cuticle lines and around my side walls to give me that nice application. I'll say this with a caveat. It is not as easy to do as melting it with the acetone. You have to be way more careful. The acetone you can just put on an angled eyeshadow brush or angled cleanup tool and melt the sides down. Whereas when you're using the glass cuticle pusher, you have to be more careful that you don't rip the decal, because that's exactly what I did in this mani. I was not being careful, shocker to anyone, and I accidentally cut off some of the decal. So what I did was I just pulled the piece up that was like laying right there on my paper towel, and I stuck it back onto my nail so you really couldn't tell that I had accidentally yanked off a piece of the decal. This is one of my favorite things about using the chokehold as the base for the decal to be applied to, is then you can go in over top of the decal and use your dip base and pour clear dip powder over until it is fully soaked up. You really want to get that clear powder totally encapsulating the decal, and then you can finish your mani like normal. So all my other nails are buffed and smooth. This one, the reason why my left hand looks like it's in a really weird position as I'm trying to fix up my filing a little bit and then smooth it out is because I don't know what I was thinking, and I had top coated my left hand, totally forgetting that my right hand needed finished. And then I'm like, oh shoot. Well, I was way too impatient to wait a few minutes until my left hand dried, which I really could have done. I have no patience. So I was like, all right, I'm just going to really carefully go around and do my buffing and shaping on top of the decal. And then coming in clutch for me again is using this e-file bit to really give me those beautiful cuticle lines. And everything that I use in this video will be linked in the description. It always is, in case sometimes I forget to say that. I'm so excited to like share all this information with you guys. I'm really not thinking about like all the products all the time. So, but everything's always linked in the description. Once I get my ring finger buffed nice and smooth, I went around with my e-file. I wipe all my nails with isopropyl alcohol again, just to make sure I didn't leave any kind of dust on them, so I can go in and do my dip top coating like I normally would. Now, whatever brand of dip liquids you're using, make sure you follow their top coating instructions. Do not try to use one brand's top coating instructions on another brand's unless you know 100% that they are exactly the same timing. Because what can happen is if you don't follow the top coat instructions for the brand that you're using, you're not going to get a shiny nail. It's going to look dull. And after you work so hard, like, why would we want to not have a super shiny nail? So the OG dip powder liquids, what you do is you do heavy activator on 5 nails, thumb to pinky. And heavy activator means 2 passes. So you dunk the brush into the activator, then slap it on your nail, dunk it back in the bottle, and then stick the activator back on your nail again. Then move through each nail, thumb to pinky. When you get to your pinky with the activator, then you want to count to 10 and go back to your thumb to start the first layer of the dip top coat. Now your first layer of dip top coat, and I do this regardless of the brand, should be floated over your nail in 2 to 3 quick, even strokes. That is going to be key to keeping your brushes from getting contaminated, which means getting too hard. So your brush can harden, even with like OG liquids that are very hard to harden. You still want to be careful and float that first layer of dip top coat over your nails. And I like to cap my edges of my nails too, because I never know if I'm going to be wearing my manis for 3 days or I'll wear them for like 7 or 8. I just kind of go with it depending on what's going on in my life. You do that thumb to pinky, that first layer, and then when you get to your pinky, you go back to your thumb and do your second layer. And you can take your time doing it a bit more detailed, really making sure that your top coat is totally covering your entire nail, your edges are capped. And what I love also about OG dip liquids is that they self-level beautifully. Now, if you're still struggling with basic dip application and you're not even ready for doing decals, then make sure you check out this next video and I will give you a bunch of tips and tricks. Thanks for joining me today, Nail Crew.